As a society, we believe that relationships that have lasted years and stood the test of time are the ones that are most significant. But who in here knows of a relationship that has lasted years but hasn't been happy or fulfilling? There's an 80-year-long Harvard study which found that close relationships, more than money or fame, are what keep people happy and healthy throughout their lives. Our happiness is directly determined by the quality of our relationships. We live in a world that has set us up for quick and validated connections. We friend someone on Facebook, we follow each other on Instagram, and comment on engagement and baby photos. And yes, that was me. Wasn't I cute? Meanwhile, anxiety and depression are at an all-time high, and our attention spans are dropping to less than that of a goldfish. We're spending increasingly more hours staring at a screen and not looking at each other. What ends up happening is that we think we're connecting, but we're not, even with the people we spend the most time with. And given that loneliness is known to be a silent killer, that's pretty scary, isn't it? Think about it. How much time do you spend actually connecting with another human being in a day? What's missing here? How do we make this better? For a time, I wasn't sure. What if I told you that I spent a year sleeping in the homes of strangers around the world? This was my quantum leap. Back in 2016, I quit my corporate job in New York City. I was sick and tired of lacking purpose and spending most of my day just staring at a screen, hardly having any meaningful conversations with anyone. I wore a mask tightly around my face to hide myself from others. I didn't want anyone to see the truth. What if what I wanted to do with my life didn't fit the mold? And if I even gave myself permission to work out what that was, would I be rejected? Have you ever felt like you couldn't be who you really are? 3 years into my career, it became too much to bear. Since I'd immigrated to the US as a child, I'd spent every ounce of my energy trying to prove that I was worthy, that I was somebody. And now here I was, living out this American dream, and I still couldn't fill this void inside of me because I was so disconnected from myself. Moments of real meaning were few and far in between because I spent most of my life being distracted and running from one to-do list to the next. And then, a series of disruptive events happened, including my grandfather's death, that shocked me into realizing that I needed to start doing what actually mattered to me. I was so desperate to feel at that point that I was willing to do anything, even take a leap of faith into the unknown. So I did something kind of crazy. I created my own social experiment in which I wanted to learn if I could know how to truly connect. So I quit my job, packed a bag, and with very little in the bank, proceeded to travel the world by relying on the people I met on the road to host me. I threw myself into the world, hoping that people were kind. I had no choice but to believe that if I jumped, humanity would catch me. If I didn't connect, I wouldn't have a place to sleep that night. So my priorities shifted from things like, what should I order for lunch today, to how can I quickly connect with the person in front of me and build mutual trust so that it's safe for me to stay in their home. During our time together today, I want you to ask yourselves, what if we radically started shifting our attention to the quality of our connections, not the quantity, and start to increase the amount of time that we spend present rather than counting years or decades as the only real proof of connection? When I was asked to speak about this topic, I was in a bit of a conundrum on picking which stories to tell you to illustrate how I came to understand the concept of connection. I'm a story coach. Helping people tell stories is what I do for a living. And now I'm supposed to pick just a few to share with you? Over the course of a year, I had over 100 people in over 20 countries across 5 continents host me. I could tell you so many stories. I could tell you about the time when I was at an airport in Serbia after a red-eye flight. At this point, I'd been traveling for a few months, and the consequences of what I'd done were really starting to hit me. I was terrified for my future, far away from everyone I loved, exhausted, and so damn lonely. I decided to get a coffee from one of the airport stands. The barista, this burly man with a big ginger beard, greeted me with the biggest smile on his face, one that almost startles you at 5 o'clock in the morning. And as he was making my coffee, he starts asking me the typical local meets traveler questions. Where are you from? What are you doing here? Where are you off to next? The difference is, this man listened. How many times have you had someone ask you, hey, how are you? How are you doing? And doesn't even stick around to listen to the answer? In those few minutes, I felt so seen and relieved of my loneliness. As I was paying for my coffee and thanked him, he says to me, you're welcome. Have a nice life. He generally told me to have a nice life, and he meant it. It was kind, finite, and real. In those few moments, the purity of that interaction shifted something inside of me. It taught me to see everyone I meet as an important human being with something to say. I'll never forget him. I could also tell you about the time when I was in Greece and I spontaneously decided to hop on a ferry to this tiny remote island. All I had was the name of a cafe owner in the main village. So I waltzed into this random cafe and I asked the owner for a place to sleep that night. Yorgos, he spent an hour going over his physical phone book. Who does that? Calling everyone on the island to see if someone was willing to host me. When he couldn't find anyone, he begrudgingly offered for me to stay at his place that night. That one night turned into 4 nights because he became like my adopted Greek dad. What I didn't know about this complete and total stranger is that Yorgos is a really good and thoughtful listener. He's one of the first people who took the time to ask me what success really meant to me. What was I looking for? He said, freedom may be simpler than you may think, my dear Celine, and he waves his hands towards the agency. I don't travel much, yet I feel free. I have everything I need right here on this island. The ocean, the breeze, the calm, the people that I love. Take the time and enjoy your travels, but don't get frustrated looking for answers to questions that may not even matter by the end of your journey. Just take the time to figure out what makes you happy. Everything else is a luxury. I didn't speak to him after I left, but I came back a year later and I surprised him by knocking on his door. He started crying because he thought he'd never see me again. Ever since then, I come back every year, and he picks me up from the ferry, treats me like a father would. He really saw me, and as a result, he too changed my life. I could tell you about the time when I spent a whole day with a local guide touring a remote village in Myanmar. And by this point, I'd been traveling for 6 months, and my loneliness was again consuming me. We spent hours sharing stories. She told me about how she'd recently lost her 2-year-old baby girl due to the medical system failing her after she couldn't afford the necessary operation. What surprised me about this woman was how much she smiled. She radiated with light and energy. I couldn't believe how much she'd suffered. So I asked her, how can you smile so much and feel happy after everything you've been through? Calmly and with a smile, she responds, I understand that we all go. That day, she taught me such a valuable lesson, that no matter how much I've suffered or think my life's unfair, what heals me is grace, accepting what is, seeing my life as a blessing, and choosing joy over grief. Out of all these stories, though, what I really want to tell you about is my grandma, because all of my experiences led me to this point. After so many profound connections with strangers all over the world, I asked myself, when was the last time that I had a real conversation with someone I knew and loved? I didn't. Most of my everyday interactions with the people that I saw the most were reduced to logistics like, how's work going and how's your day? I wasn't seeing them the way I'd seen my hosts. So I decided to try this with my grandma. She is my last living grandparent, and to be honest, I have a lot of regret when it comes to my grandparents. I never felt like I really knew them outside of what my parents told me. So I sat her down when I visited her in Brazil, and I asked her the same questions I'd asked so many people around the world, like, what was your childhood like? And what does love mean to you? If you could have done anything with your life, what would it have been? She told me about how her mother died when she was just 5 years old, this beautiful Indian woman with a braid down her butt, and how her father never took on another wife because he was so scared that she wouldn't take care of his 8 children. How he'd sit them around the fireplace and tell them to respect everyone, even your neighbor's dog. And when my grandma had her first child at the age of 17 and went on to have 10 more children, all she wanted to do was to pass on her father's lessons, to be sincere, to be honest, to be good. And even though my grandma grew up in poverty, her guiding principle was to educate her children. Money can't buy what I have, she told me. A healthy family, a full house during Christmas, kids who are successful and doing well for themselves. She also told me that one of her proudest moments was when we flew her from Brazil to Philadelphia to watch me graduate from university. She'll never forget the thousands of graduation caps flying into the air, or the fancy hotel we put her in, or my mom zooming in her huge lens to photograph me from the stadium. She thought she would never see the day when her granddaughter would graduate from one of the best universities in America. To see something like that, it reminded her that everything she fought for was worth it. In that brief, 1-hour conversation, I felt like I saw my grandmother for the first time. I never knew any of this. I knew a bit about her background, that she makes great coffee and rice and beans, that she's a hardworking woman with a difficult past. But now, I could really see her strength, her wisdom, her passion, her values that shaped my life and the woman I am today. This was priceless, and it all happened in less of an hour of real presence and just asking the right questions. While I was traveling, I had to convince near to complete strangers to let me sleep in their homes after hardly knowing me, to trust me, to feel vulnerable, being themselves around me. People told me things they didn't tell their own children, parents, partners. I'd be having a conversation saying things like, have you told your husband about this? I could feel people's relief that there was finally someone who wanted to genuinely listen and be present. And because of this, they poured themselves into me and I into them. In those moments of pure connection, we could finally put down the masks and see each other for who we really are. Imperfect human beings, fundamentally craving the same things: love, connection, being seen. Each with our own set of hopes, dreams, insecurities, and fears. Imagine if we applied this to our own relationships. And while I can't give you the exact formula, that's something you're going to have to figure out for yourself. What I can do is share some inspiration for how you can deepen your own everyday interactions with your friends, parents, family, strangers. 1, make eye contact. Are you actually seeing this person? I did this fun little experiment where I would spend 60 seconds just looking into someone's eyes, and it was really weird. But in the moment, I felt like there was no one else in the world. 2, listen more than you talk. Most times, people will share things with you when they're given enough space. Listen with intention instead of just waiting for your turn to respond. 3, ask thoughtful and curious questions. Skip the small talk. Ask the questions that matter, that uncover this person's values and how they see the world. Some examples of questions I'd ask would include, what is your biggest dream? What does love mean to you? If time and money weren't an issue, what would you do? 4, use words like I feel rather than I think. Allow yourself to be vulnerable and express your emotions. You're exchanging energy instead of just giving someone your opinion, and everyone's got one of those. 5, gratitude. Thank the person for opening up. Express what you appreciate about them. Those words that so often go left unspoken, speak them. Here's my challenge for you. Go home and spend some time with the relationships that you value the most. Reconnect with them instead of assuming that time is sufficient or using how long you've known them as a safety net. Heck, if you're feeling courageous, strike up a conversation with a stranger. Take 15 minutes, the length of this TEDx talk, and use them to really look someone in the eyes and see past the mask, past the fears, and into their soul. We are begging for it. Who will you see once you let go of the mask? Thank you.